ladies and gentlemen, for one of the best sports podcasts in the business. Subscribe on YouTube to Shaky's Sports Journeys.
Hi and welcome to another episode of Shaky's Sports Journeys. As always, as I mentioned at the start, you can find us by searching Shaky Sports Journeys on YouTube, on Spotify, iTunes and Podbean. Please do subscribe. We have something for all sporting fans, be it football, cricket, rugby, boxing, something for everybody, as well as other elite athletes from other sports as well. Today's guest, very well respected footballer in Scotland. I remember him from my childhood growing up. Even though I'm a Rangers fan, I'm also a fan of this guy and what he's done for Scottish football. So I welcome former fullback for Motherwell, Chelsea, Celtic, Scotland national team, Mr. Thomas Boyd, MBE. How are you, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much. I seem very well just now, obviously through this pandemic, but as good as health as I could hope to be.
Glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. So what I want to do today is I want to take you on a wee bit of roller coaster. Get that memory of yours working, Tom, and take you back to childhood. And just tell me a little bit about your childhood, your family background, where you grew up, etc.
Yeah, no problem. I was born in Glasgow way back as a wee kid, born in Springburn, but wasn't there very long. My mother's, my granny was from a wee village called Broomhouse out by Baillieston at the edge of the east end of Glasgow. And we moved out there when I was about one and a half or so. So don't remember anything about Springburn at all. My father, Maryhill, my mother was from that area of Broomhouse. So we moved out to a wee village called Broomhouse, and that was where I stayed for 20 odd years until I left to go down to Chelsea. Stayed with my mother and father through my Motherwell days, and was brought up in a wee little village, mixed village with so many different age groups that gave you experiences of different things through the years, and we all seemed to come together as they did at that time, not having so many things to entertain you, like podcasts like you have yourself, Cassim, and PlayStations and stuff like that. So everything really involved the community way back at that time, whether it be down playing football, it be the grandwains, the sons and the grannies and the granddads, sorry, all playing football down in a wee park at Broomhouse. And that was a great experience and a learning experience, and it certainly helped you as you went along your way about how you were developed as an adult as well, and seeing so many people interact through the course of the time that was there at Broomhouse.
So football, does it come from? Did your family, was there already interest in football?
No, well, I had an older brother who was just a year older than me, so we both would like to go down the park and play football. I had two younger sisters. No interest, but my father never played football, wasn't interested in football. But I think just with everybody else, and the pastime that you had, other than running and playing gatey and hide and seek and all that around the wee estate, which was a nice wee size that you couldn't get lost. It wasn't too big. It was football. It was football just about every opportunity. Going down to the wee park or playing, as you say, we talk about playing gatey with a wee tennis ball or even a can and stuff like that. That was your education cup. Some of us couldn't afford the ball at that time when we just were only young and didn't have a lot of money and stuff. So we just make do with whatever it was that we could do to try and play football. So it was probably just like so many other youngsters at that time, so many other families that were brought up were just living on the breadline and just trying to make do for what we could. So that was my introduction. My introduction with football was just when there was a wee kid coming through up with the wee village. I then obviously went to school just up at Baillieston and St Bridget's, and that was when my first structured football game was played, and that was in the school team, and I played there for a wee while. I was a wee younger lad and breaking through, and all the ones of my father. I remember my very first game we played up at St Kevin's, and I think why the guy had taken me there, or the manager had taken me there, was because St Kevin's up at Brigade, I don't know if anybody knows it, is one of the smallest football pitches ever It's
Right.
almost like a five-a-side pitch. So I was one of the wee small ones going in amongst the slightly older ones, and that's why I was brought along. So I developed. I think I was about 9 when I played for under 11s, and played ever since then in different roles, varying roles, and that was my school right through. Went up in secondary with St Ambrose and Coatbridge. But when I was at primary at St Bridget's, I got a wee trial for a boys' club team, which was in Easterhouse, Oakengill Boys' Club. One of my friends who were in the team were going along for a wee trial, and I managed to go along, get a wee trial as well. And so our first boys' club team was Oakengill Boys' Club in Easterhouse, and played all those lovely pitches that they have in Easterhouse. If many of them will know it, at Loch End.
I played a bit of boys' club football in Easterhouse. I played against the young offenders once down there. That was they gave us a good doing on the pitch that evening. I tell you that much.
Well, that was in the times when you seen so many gangs and others up and down certain sides of the pitch and just waiting for their game to finish. And sometimes it didn't finish before they started chasing each other. So it was that was an experience as well. But that only went to I was about 14, and then they disbanded for a season, and I left Oakengill Boys Club, went along to Celtic Boys Club for a couple of years, I think from 15s and 16s, but they didn't. At that time, I wasn't on an S form, so they didn't keep me on, and I left and trial with Motherwell in the early 80s. 70s, sorry, early 70s, 80s, and got a trial with Motherwell, and they signed me up. Frank Connor was the guy who came along and signed me up. He was assistant to, as you know, this man, Mr. Jock Wallace, who was the Motherwell manager for a wee bit. So they were like chalk and cheese together, Jock and Frank. They were great buddies together, but and did well for the team. I think Frank left to go to Celtic after a wee spell, and Jock left to go to Rangers. Obviously, where both their hearts were really were at the time. So that was my early upbringing. My school, as I say, St Ambrose, were a very successful team. A lot of very good players in that team. None went on to make it really big. A couple of trials, or Jim McDowell went down to Coventry. Owen McGivern, a fantastic football player, went up to Dundee, but for whatever varying reasons, I think Jim was more injuries and Owen didn't quite make it. Guys didn't make it at the game, and you know, just there's so many players like that have had hard luck stories that didn't make it in the game. But I was a little bit fortunate and managed to obviously get my trial with Motherwell, and once I think when I went into Motherwell it favoured me a little bit, and that the team were struggling at the time. I'd signed S form at the time. I don't know if you remember, there was a YTS scheme, or was it the Youth Opportunity Programme? I can't remember which one came first, but it was basically an apprenticeship, a cheap apprenticeship, which was £26 a week. And that was what they were paying you, and so, but it's what you done. It's what you took on. Way back in those days when I was at Motherwell, it's what you took on, and never looked back since. Not YTS. When I was on a YTS player, I was getting my first team debut with Motherwell.
Some career you had with Motherwell. 1983, you went into the pros, went into the big league. You played for Motherwell from 1983 until 1991, 252 appearances. Quite a, really long servant for the club. Talk to me about your time at Motherwell, and we'll finish off with obviously a big success towards the end. But what was it like playing there?
Well, I remember signing Motherwell way back at the start when I was there. Were basically a part-time team. There was only a few full-time players, and eventually when Tommy McLean was coming in, he was wanting to change the structure of the team and make them all full-time for obvious reasons, trying to make it a wee bit better. That really mattered for all of them, and for the club as well, to make them full-time rather than part-time, and trying not to be a yo-yo club as they were at times. So that was a part-time team way back at the start when it was on the S form. It then developed and changed. But before Tommy McLean came in to develop the club into what it was and became successful after a couple of years, because the first few years weren't that great, we it was Bobby Watson had taken over from Jock Wallace. Bobby Watson, ex-Airdrie, I don't know if some of you know, but ex-Airdrie man, big Motherwell man as well. And he was a manager for us, and Motherwell weren't doing too well. But I was able to get a wee chance. I played about 4 or 5 games as a young kid, an 18-year-old at that time. And the manager told me, he left me out for a few games. And I think the big thing at this time was when he was thinking about bringing me back, it was a Scottish Cup game against Celtic, a quarter-final in 1983. And he was going to choose between myself, big Johannes Edwardson, who sadly passed away just not that long ago. He played for Celtic down the years, played for Motherwell, obviously, played a teammate of mine. And he was chosen ahead of me because he had experience. And Celtic ended up winning the game 6-0. And so thereafter, the league was gone. Motherwell were getting relegated. And Bobby Watson came up and said to me, he says, well, look, there's the jersey. You're going to play no matter what to gain experience. So I could have had a bad game, a stinker of a game, as I probably did sometimes, but through learning experience. And he gave me my opportunity to get into playing first-team football. He left shortly after that. You know, he came in almost halfway through the season, but left at the end of the season and didn't think he could take him further. And that's when Tommy McLean came in. And we took a wee while. I think it saved for reconstruction on one season. And Tommy, at the time, you'll recognise me now as a fullback, and a lot of people do that. But where I was a player at that time, not the biggest, but I was a sweeper. I don't know, obviously the game has changed a little bit, but it's mainly 2 centre-backs or maybe 3 centre-backs or something. Well, there was one player who used to be called a sweeper behind the big centre-back. Yeah. And he was a guy that would go and head with the ball. The wee sweeper would tuck in behind and cover up things and cover a full-back. Well, that's where I was really, and that was where I was born and bred, my kind of game. Played there for a wee while. But then after so long, I broke my leg, and Tommy McLean had went out and got some, it was either Tom McAdam or Craig Patterson to come in to the team for a wee bit more experience. I get pushed out into midfield for a wee spell for a couple of seasons, just about a season and a half, I think, or so. But I wasn't good enough for there. I didn't, not that I didn't feel comfortable. You always think that you're going to still play and do whatever you can play anywhere, but certainly after a wee while, I thought, no, that's not me. And I says, right, I want to go back into being a defender. But obviously with Tom and Craig, Tom McAdam and Craig Patterson being in the central, I could not get into those areas. So the only position, Fraser Wishart was a right back, the only position that was available was left back. Now, I'm right-footed naturally, but I could play left back. You know, I actually became more comfortable playing left back than right at times, which I've played ever since then. And I'm playing at Celtic, playing with Scotland. I think they're probably equally either side. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I could play anywhere. But that's how I developed into a fullback. And it was in about 3 or 4 years into my career at Motherwell that it was changed, and I developed into a fullback and overlapping back. And one of the big catalysts as well that helped us at that time when I was a player at Motherwell, I didn't develop a bit of pace. It wasn't electrifying, but it was a season where I worked on it. I went through the close season, worked through a close season, and get really, really quick. And the signing of David Cooper, you'll know who David Cooper is, a magnificent ex-football player, and he played for Rangers. Well, he came into the team and raised the stature and the profile, and also the ability of David, who was exceptional on the ball. And he was somebody that could utilise the pace that I had to overlap. And over Bobby Russell as well was another one who played on that left side area. So they're another fantastically gifted football player. So we started to develop at Motherwell with the players that were coming in were getting better standard than what we had way back in the part-time days. And as it got on, and as you've seen the success that Tommy then brought into the team, I think on one occasion finishing second. I'd left the club at that time, but finishing second later on. So it developed into, and Tom had developed the team through a way down at the depths of being relegated, coming back up, getting saved a couple of times to being a very solid team that would certainly have finished in the top 6 of the league had that been about at that time. So yeah, you could see the signs of getting developed. But yeah, I had a fantastic time, a learning experience at Motherwell. And then the last 3 or 4 years at Motherwell was really when it was starting to take off for myself and started to really get noticed. Obviously with other teams, and then in the final year, my last season in '91, winning the cup, that teams were then starting to look at me.
That was a massive finish to your Motherwell career. 4-3 Scottish Cup win over Dundee United. Must have been a great feeling. Because the way you've talked about it there, you were an evolving team when you went there. You touched on the fact that you were pretty much part-time, and things just picked up. To get a Scottish Cup win as you were departing the club must have been a great feeling.
Well, it was absolutely. I still recall when I'm going up to lift the trophy, that my head is shaking in disbelief that a small provincial club, for where we were and where I was as a wee boy playing in the park with my grandas and uncles and aunties, whatever, whoever wanted to come in and play a game. And here you are standing in the footsteps of Hampden and lifting the Scottish Cup, which I think probably just about every kid would have dreamed of. So yeah, it was a very special, but it was obviously a little bit somber as well. But I knew that was my last game for Motherwell. I was leaving that season regardless. The rules of a player were slightly different. The Bosman rule hadn't kicked in until another 2 or 3 years, possibly after that. So the club still held on to registrations, but it certainly looked very, very likely. There was a couple of discussions before, I think, the semi-final, that a couple of teams wanted me, and I think there was certainly Nottingham Forest had discussions with me, but wasn't comfortable with what I was discussing with Mr. Clough as he was, and a couple of other teams I spoke to. So I definitely knew I was leaving, but who it was going to be at the end of the season wasn't really that clear. But I knew on that cup final day that was my last game, and what a way to leave a small club that you go and take the trophy and leave, and go down wherever you live. A nice way to leave.
Yeah, and a nice, but at that point, long serving for you did your time for the club. It wasn't like you were there. You don't see it as much anymore, Tom, where guys are playing at clubs for 7, 8, 9 years. They're a couple of years here, a couple of years there. That was a proper servant to the club. You did a phenomenal job, great finish to things, and a lovely progression to go south of the border and head down to Stamford Bridge to go to Chelsea. You must have been very excited for that move.
Totally. Fantastic move for myself. It was obviously going from a small provincial club at Motherwell in a wee town, and I was only 10 minutes away from where it was, and still knowing all your friends and all that, to get into this big city that is London, the biggest in Britain, and it was massive changes, and there was a slight, what would you say? When I signed for Chelsea, I signed at the end of the season. It wasn't the manager that signed me. Right? There's a wee story to that. In my process of the teams that I was talking to Chelsea, who I eventually went to, and the manager that I was talking to was a guy called Bobby Campbell. So Bobby Campbell was, you've got plans, this is who we're going to play with, and Stevie Clark, blah, blah, and whoever else is in here in the defence. So that was fit. Then Bobby Campbell resigned towards the end of the season. I went, okay, so how's that going to be scuppered, that move? But the assistant, who was a caretaker at the time, was a Gwyn Williams, and under the directorship of the chairman, Mr. Ken Bates, who was quite a character and quite a well-known character, they proceeded to continue with this move. So in one way, not that it hampered me in any way, but going into the following season, the new manager that was there was an Ian Porterfield, a Scottish lad, who scored the winning goal for Leeds in 1973 for Sunderland in the FA Cup. I wasn't his signing. Yeah. I was like a player who was being established and being there. I was a new signing, but I wasn't his signing. Unlike guys like who came in, Big Paul Elliott had left Celtic to get into Chelsea. and other guys like that. So I don't know if that hampered me a little bit. But anyway, I went in the team and really enjoyed it. Great experience, obviously playing against some of the best players in the world at that time away in the league. And it was just before, I think the season before the actual Premier League, as it's called, started. And so, yeah, great games, playing here, there and everywhere. But you've got a shock that I did only stay there for that length of time. But when it came, the options for me, I think, were far outweighed me staying at the football club.
Well, yeah, I mean, boyhood fan of the Glasgow Celtic. So they call it the best bit of business Celtic have done. It was the biggest steal, they called it, as Tony Cascarino. You basically it was a transfer swap between the two of you, where it brought you up to Parkhead and seen him go down. And you arrived at Celtic 1992, and you came into what was a bloody strong squad.
Yeah, in fact, the team at that time, towards the end of that half of the season, were playing very well and on a very strong run. I think the only game we lost was a semi-final to Rangers. My first experience of the derby game was at Ibrox. I wasn't allowed to go as a kid. My father had a bad experience at one and took a wrong turn, and
that used to happen to me as well. I wasn't allowed to go to the Old Firm games either.
And so I wasn't allowed to go to them. And so my first experience of that game was actually going to Ibrox and playing in it. And what strikes you and what is the biggest thing is the noise that comes and is generated in the stadium when it's full and both sets of supporters. That's something that it will never obviously be repeated now because of the situation that it's down to 800 supporters, and it's not the same. It's certainly not the same. Back then,
how many, Tom, would
well, it would be one side of the stand. It would be one side the Copland stand. I think we might have actually had that time. Might have got a wee bit more. I'm not sure. Obviously, the reconstructions had probably just finished and stuff. So I think it probably certainly one side of the it was obviously Copland, I think it was, and that was full and singing, and yeah, a great experience, and just remember your ears were ringing just for days. Now that's maybe why I've got tinnitus just now with the noise that the fans were cheering and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it came about as a bit of a surprise, the move to Celtic, obviously with Tony, and some ways, that worked out for me, and that Tony didn't do too well at Celtic, because if he had done quite well scoring goals, then the move would never come about, and he'd have still been there, and I may have been still at Chelsea. But as you say, for myself, boyhood hero of Celtic and great support, and I'm just absolutely delighted that for me and your family, as it is, every member of your family, every member of your school, everybody that's seen you wants to see you do well, and obviously want your team and hopefully do well. So thankfully, I've not played just the one game, but I played quite a few games, and over the course of the campaign, the 11 odd years.
I call it the dark years for about the first 6-7 of them, because I mean I was jumping up and down for most of those years.
I'm going to say, are you speaking for yourself here, or are you speaking on behalf of me here, Cassie? I think it's on myself, isn't it?
They were obviously bright days for Rangers. Yeah. Rangers were, dominating, winning the league titles, 9 in a row to be precise. Talk to me a bit about, why were they able to? I mean, both squads were strong. I mean, Celtic weren't lacking, but why?
We were certainly, Celtic were in decline. Rangers were, in terms of the players that they could come in and bring in, and the quality players that they go. And we were, when obviously the height of our problems and the changeover until Fergus came in, and it took a couple of years for that Fergus impact to come in. It was on a decline, and the players, you look at some of the signings, it was free signings that we could try and buy, and players that just didn't enhance the quality of the club. So it started to wane and go down. There was still a couple of players, as you say, John Collins, Paul McStay, guys like that were certainly excellent, fantastic football players, but they weren't enough to bring the rest up to scratch, and obviously to be competing with Rangers at that time and what they had available to them. So that was something that, for me came as a surprise, thinking that you go to Celtic and you'd be winning. If it's not one season, it'll be the next season, and it did take a little while for that to develop. For us to really compete was when we first went back to Celtic Park. That was getting redeveloped, and we went back to Celtic Park, and we had a wonderful season. We're losing one league game, too many draws, losing one league game that season. We started to compete under Tommy. He certainly gave everything to the football club, and he's certainly somebody who had a massive influence on how they played and how the players played. And a way back then, in terms of the passion of the club that he could transfer to all these other players. But the quality that we had, obviously, Rangers had quality as well when you look at the players and the signings they had, and that's why they just edged it, as Tommy says about Andy Gorham and what he did to prevent us from winning a league earlier in that campaign, and never rightly see. You just go back and look at the highlights of some of the saves that Andy Gorham was, and as a teammate for me at Scotland as well, he produced save after save, and but that wasn't just the only reason. It would generally be in a case, you look at the last couple of games that Celtic have played Rangers, where they maybe dominated the game but not taking their chances. Well, that was what the 90s was about. Not all the time, by far from it, but certainly quite a lot of the games Celtic would dominate possession and probably slightly more chances. But certainly we would maybe end up having a wee mistake somewhere along the line, and that was punished, certainly with the quality that Rangers had. And that was, not a précis of what that was at that time. There was a lot of other factors, but certainly that was seemed to be the abiding memory of some of those games and the difference between the teams,
I've already had Simon Donnelly on, good old teammate of yours, pal of yours as well.
Yeah.
And Simon said pretty much the same thing. He said you could play fantastic in those days, and Brian Laudrup could get the ball on and just make some magic happen. And I mean, what a player! I mean, you must have went head to head with him a few times if you played.
Yeah, but I was never directly. I think only maybe a couple of occasions was I directly, because quite often I was more as a central player. Brian maybe floated. He floated left, right. Really would play in the central area. Because as I said to you beforehand, well, I played fullback for quite a while with Celtic. But the season that Tommy came in, he put me into as a sweeper.
Right, okay.
The first season was alongside John Hughes, now Ross County manager, and we were the partnership there. And then Alan Stubbs came in the following season, and that was the partnership there. And I was playing more in the central, but in other games, yes. And I love playing against the better players. I think everybody does. As long as you're a good player and you know how to do that. There would be occasions where you would think that they'll get the better of you, but there's a learning process. Well, how do I try and stop that? How do I learn from that? And I think too many players don't learn from that. Right, okay, keep repeating the same mistakes that seems to be prevalent. Certainly Celtic for this season, but it's something that just do. You play against these players and you do learn far greater than you play against a poor player and taking the ball off them quite often. So you've got to be up to speed. You've got to be up to your best. And I think I was a decent player and certainly as a decent defender. I like to overlap from occasion on time to time. But I think first and foremost, I think I was a better defender than an attacking fullback. And I could do Rob, and I think that was the reason why quite a few managers not respected me, but certainly could keep me in those positions. And why I only scored 2 goals, because every set piece I was told to stay back. Right. and because I had a wee bit of pace, but certainly I could well organise and at the back. So that was one of the reasons. I'd certainly love playing against better players, and certainly Brian was in that category. One of the worst players, the hardest players, to play against was Mark Walters. Was a Rangers player who was a guy who was 2-footed, and guys like that, like myself, are 2-footed. They're very difficult to say. Well, they were shown one way, but he could think, and if he was comfortable going the other way, then he was very good. Trying to whip crosses in. Well, how do you go? You've got to get really close. So there's that learning process, and as you say, you only get better by playing against these boys and learning what they do what's the trick? You know, if you've got so many tricks, then it becomes harder, and again, that's where you get world-class players. But if we've only got one trick, then you learn about that. And you learn, right, okay, when he gets the ball and comes that way, he turns on a sixpence and turns the other way. You know, so you get to the wee mannerisms. And so first and foremost, for me, I was a defender, and I thought I was a decent defender at times. I never get skinned too many times, thankfully. I would say, but maybe that's me just bragging about myself.
I think you've been very humble there, but you were a cracking defender. I mean, some of the things we're going to go on to talk about, you know, tells us how good a defender you were, and also you were very well known for having that speed and being able to get up and down and overlapping, and probably working well in tandem with certain players.
Yeah.
So you have your bedding in period. Probably had to be quite mentally tough during those seasons, because you kept coming on the other side of falling second place. But everything changed when Celtic decided to make you captain. You know,
yeah.
They should have done. What were they doing for all those years? They should have just given you the captaincy.
No. What they were doing was they obviously were a legend. Our football club was still in the capacity. And the only reason I got the captaincy was
Paul McStay.
Paul McStay retired through injury.
Fair enough.
And so it was, on one hand, you know, the biggest experience and the best honour of my lifetime. But then you say you've got to try and stop Rangers' best ever team, arguably, down the years of doing 10 in a row. We didn't start off too well, fair enough. But yeah, for without any question, one of the best honours bestowed upon me at the football club. And that shows a lot of respect from the management, and also respect, and I think I got from certain players within, you know, old players, and I think that's what you're trying to do, captain. There's always, it brings so many other things involved, as well as trying to be a player on the park. There's so many things off the park and on it as well, that you've got to do a lot of organisation, and you have to be trusted in doing that to the best of your ability. Not just about, you see it sometimes where players' performances maybe dip because of there's so many things off the park and they're not fully concentrating on what you're doing on it, and you know, certainly you can take your eye off the ball. So yeah, absolutely fantastic honour for myself that was given that armband, but it was no easy task, shall we say?
Yeah, well, the pressure
in that season.
The pressure was on.
Massive, yeah.
Massive pressure. 10 in a row on the cards for Rangers. If they'd managed to maybe get that 10 in a row, who knows how many more they might have done. But but you guys, I mean, another big player came to Parkhead around that time. Now, if I get this right, this was under Wim Janssen's management at the time. Yeah,
it was Wim that came in and gave me a captaincy. Murdo was a caretaker until Wim came in quite late on in the sort of pre-season campaign. So it took a while for Wim to bed in the team. But when Wim was bedding in the team, he was looking to get signings. And the signings that came in had an immediate impact, apart from Henrik's first pass. And he hates us for talking about that, the one up at Easter Road. Honestly, he repaid that 1,000,000 times over for what he'd done against Hibs and passing it to, of all people, Chick Charnley. But you look at the signings that we made in that season, where we had Henrik Larsson, who went on to be an absolute legend. We had there's something there. We had a European Cup winner from the previous season come into Celtic, and Paul Lambert. You know, you think about that now. You think about what that would cost.
Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, you think about what that would cost now. I think we got Paul for 4 million or something like that. You know, absolute steal. So we managed to get him. Craig Bully was another fantastic player. I think Jackie might know.
That was Scotland's midfield for the.
Well, not quite at that time, because Craig was always irked by Craig Brown.
Right,
because Craig was always playing in the right wing back role, and he hated it with a passion. And I don't know if you remember the goal that we scored at in the World Cup at Norway, and it was Craig Bully scored the goal in the second game, the one each draw. And he ran to the sidelines, and just to prove a point, look, that's where I should be playing. I should be playing in midfield. So he took you an age to get to playing in the central area. But we had some fantastic players in that central area. We had Stuart McCall, we had Gary McAllister, John Collins, Paul McStay. So that's the reason why Craig to bide his time a wee bit.
Mhm.
So you had guys like that. Big Mark Reaper was another one who came in, very determined character, came in. Stephen Mahy, who came in and was a great defender. So there was a lot of signings that season that came in to enhance the team. And it needed to be, because there was a few, as you know, about the players that we talk about, that under Tommy, the three amigos, Big Pierre, Di Canio and Cadetti, Andy Tom was another one. They all left. Well, Andy Tom, I think, was still there, but the three had left. So they were massive players for us as well, and they'd left. So to try and replace us and rebuild the team in a short space of time. But eventually we got there, and as you said, good players clicked together, and they started well. Obviously winning the League Cup that season at Ibrox against Dundee United. That was a 3-0 victory at Dundee United at Ibrox. So that gave us a wee boost to know that, by the end of the season, there's not going to be a photograph without a trophy in it, for the team lineup, which
nice
had
feeling,
been for.
Nice feeling for you as captain as well. First time captain is in.
Yeah, there's no better way to start off as a captaincy in the first trophy that was available that you win it. So it's a wee relief off your back. Some managers, captain, somebody win anything in their time. Others it takes a wee while. So it's it was a great relief. But obviously the bigger prize that season was the league trophy, which I think for all the fans, we had to win that one. Yeah.
Continued on, season went from strength to strength, but it went right down to the wire. It was squeaky bum time, as they say, where you came towards the back end of the season.
Yeah.
But you managed to get over the line, and you stopped what would have been a momentous 10 in a row for Rangers.
I can see the pain in your face here, Kasim. I can see the grudging, gracious.
It was,
Yes.
It was a tough one to swallow, because I knew from being a childhood Rangers fan how big a historical thing that would have been to win 10 in a row.
Yeah, you as a kid coming up, and all you ever knew of Rangers winning the league, probably when you started.
I didn't know anything else. I didn't think you guys could win. I just didn't think Celtic could turn us over. I really didn't, because my memories even before then, I wasn't really watching football, so I just knew Rangers winning. And when that happened, it was like, oh, Tom Boyd has ruined it. Tom Boyd and a bunch of ruined the party.
I would love to take all the adulation for myself, and that's why I've got a hump in my back here with carrying Larsons and Lamberts and all these kind. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
They were all. I think it's not an easy fix, but if you can supply yourself and get yourself filled with good players, it makes everybody's job easier. It makes a captain's job easier if you've got guys like that, where you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 captains in the team at any one time, and that's what you've got to have. You've got to have guys of character and guys of determination that can take that role if somebody's out or somebody's not on it. Then somebody else comes in and takes, and that's what we had, and that's what most teams have that win league championships. They've got guys that step up to the mark at any given time, and that's how you win championships.
What was it feeling like when you got over the line and you picked up the league title?
Right. Well, do you want to leave just now, and I'll replicate that kind of? I can just. Can ooze it, me. Listen. As every Celtic supporter would have wanted to, lift or play one game for your club. Then the next stage is, if you're playing for your club to be successful. Well, I had that with the League Cup, and then the next stage, the most important, is to win the league trophy, and we got that. And again, it was a sense of pride, but a sense of relief as well. That after so long, that it's finally happened, and the great joy that comes with those years of hurt down the, it certainly would have been. It's a day in your life that you will never forget.
Did you get a phone call from the legend Paul McStay at that point to say, "How the hell you done that? I've been trying to knock that door down for the last 9 years."
Listen, I've always said you're better being a lucky player than a good player, and I certainly was very lucky that season. In that, what we had at our disposal and what came together. I remember talking to obviously, I think it was Andy Gorham one time, and I think he said because Vim Johnson was there and the tactics that he got, I think that's confused Rangers a little bit and stuff. But it wasn't so much gung ho as it would have been under Tommy and stuff like that, you know. So that may have been a factor. There was other factor. I think the key factor is that obviously Vim coming in and being able to gel that team, that players. It not wouldn't have been easier, but in terms of getting the better quality players in makes it a lot easier, and that's I think what Vim was able to get at that time to bring in good quality players.
But it's sad the way he kind of.
Yeah, well, it came as a surprise, but obviously there was disagreements with himself and I think predominantly Jock Brown, which were irreparable, and I think he left. Yeah, it's sad that he left, and sad that the man has come in to stop the 10 is not there to take it further. And who knows where it went? If it went further, no Rangers bought players that are good quality, but whether we've been able to sustain that and compete at that, you know, you never know with hindsight. But yeah, it was sad for everyone that you know, he wasn't around for any longer than he did. But what a season and what an impact that he made.
Well, he can't.
He'll live on.
For
his impact, yeah.
His memory will live on. He might have went on to have a couple of shocking years, and he might not have been, but he'll always be remembered. As you'll always be remembered as well. That he's as manager, as captain, you led Celtic to stopping the 10 in a row. Brings in the mighty Irishman Martin O'Neill comes to Celtic. Talk to me a wee bit about how you gelled with him when he arrived.
Well, listen, you gel with Martin. We just listen to Martin. I think that's for most people his impression with him. But what he says and how he comes across. He comes across with respect, and he gives you respect, and how he talks, and you know, he's very knowledgeable in the game. But he had a great assistant, and he would work off him. The two assistants that he had, Steve Wolford, but in particular John Robertson, was wonderful with him. Great guys, and they worked well with him, and I think he took them just about everywhere with him. Wherever he went, and you know, certainly they were key to a lot of the good things that were within the football club. But yeah, Martin was a very intelligent man, great enthusiasm that he had, as you say, and you were talking earlier about
on the touchline as well.
Yeah, without any shadow, and you know, there's something in that you can get up for that kind of thing. I think. I think there's probably a release that they're not out there on the park being involved and doing something. They can put a team into the park, but it's up to the players that can do it. You've working all your set pieces, you're working all your moves. But if the players don't do that, there could be a certain degree of frustration. So I think there's certainly something in that, and it's in his nature that he goes out and just gives everything for whatever team that he's managing at the time, you know. So yeah, he had massive influence and obviously brought some greatness to the team with winning a treble, and having a major impact and a success at Celtic. But I don't think that was to be, you know, you would almost be assured when coming in with the players that he got. Again, we talk about the signings and the stop to 10 and the players that come in. You look at the players that Martin brought in as well, and obviously in particular Chris Sutton, John Hartson, and guys like
around
that.
The time as well that Lubo Moravcik.
Lubo came in with Dr. Joe a couple of years before, but I think certainly Martin got the best out of him. And certainly produced gifted, the most two-footed player I've ever seen play, taking corners.
I've even heard Zidane. Zidane was a fan.
Well, yeah, exactly. He gave him high. No, that's coming for something. I think I know bad for himself at his own right at times, and if he's bobbing up on Lubo, yeah. So some of the signings we come in, some players were maturing still, and Petrov was coming as a young boy, and he was maturing and was making him as a better player. Alan Thompson, who was a massive impact for us, big game player. There were so many others within the structure of that team. And also, I think you can see what, as well as Martin, brought a physical presence to the team that had an influence in certain games, obviously from set pieces. But I think that would be doing him a disservice in terms of looking back on what he was, because the team played some decent football as well and some great football players. As you mentioned about Lubo, Alan Thompson and guys like Petrov and all these players that could play football. So it was the best of both worlds way back then at that time. And then Celtic was a great time to be playing under Martin.
An honour as you're the only second captain after Billy McNeil to get the treble over the line. You know, these that
was in our history, and it just shows you how difficult it is to win a treble. You know, down the years, how often it had been done, or how less it had been done. And certainly the players, you know, certainly you look at them and you look at the quality, and with Martin coming in as well, then it was geared for success in terms of who came in, and then just he came in with his ideas, and he came in and just made sure that everybody was certainly passionate about the football games and the club, and it really caught the imagination for the whole support, and it was a great time for us at that time.
Another league title, 2001-2002, which is now bringing you to the back end of your career.
I was then taking a wee back step. Paul Lambert was taking over as captain, and that's how I became the club captain at that time, and I think that possibly could have been, well, I only played a couple of league games the following season, a couple of League Cup games the following season, so the writing was on the wall. You know, one of the kind of things, you know, with Scott Brown or whatever, it's just one of those. I didn't want to leave at the time, didn't want to leave the club, but knowing that I think that was going to be, I had options to go elsewhere, but I don't think I wanted. I think I'd done myself a favour. I'd been through a couple of back operations in my time under John Barnes.
What age were you then?
I was 36, 37. So
the aches and pains
are
stuff.
I know players have been on to play.
I'm 36, so I can vouch for the pains that you get now compared to when you're 27.
I had a few things in my mind. There was options to go and play on for a couple of years at another club. But as I says to myself, a couple of back injuries, I said, well, is this going to last if I fibber another couple of years? I said, no, I'll leave that and I'll just retire. And so eventually the following season, got to Seville, but didn't play too often. I retired at the end of that season. I think that was it, finally up, and just leave in my last year would be at Celtic.
Great career at Celtic, you know, phenomenal. It's but you went through the tough years, and you got your dessert towards the last 5 years of your time there. But you know, it wasn't always plain sailing. You know, it's tough when you play for one of the two big clubs in Scotland. You know, the pressure's always there.
There's massive pressure on you, both within your football field, but also in your private life and everything, and walking down the streets and everybody recognising. I still get that to this day. Mm-hmm. People recognising you from all football fronts, all teams, and it's great, you know, because they recognise you for a reason, for what you've done in the game. You've had an impact in the game in some way, whatever, and hopefully for the better. And certainly had a few good games during the years. So yeah, that's something that it's hard sometimes to deal with. You know, that kind of side of that publicity. When sometimes you just want to go for a wee quiet night and you don't get a wee quiet night. So, and that was all before the really introduction of the modern media, which is really intrusive, I would imagine, at times. I don't think I would have liked to have been about at times where that really kicked off a way back. You thought, that's just, I think, very difficult to handle at times. As we've seen, some of the things that have gone on just now are just not acceptable, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things I've left for the latter part of our chat here is the fact that you also, during all of this, racked up 72 caps for your national team, Scotland. In a very successful period as well as an international team, something that, you know, the current generation have been starved of for a long time. It's seen you become a Scottish FA. You're in the role of honour there as well. But I'm going to take you through a couple of tournaments, you know, big tournaments that you were part of. And the first one you were part of was Euro 92 under the management of Andy Roxburgh. You know, take me back to that time and the excitement of getting into a big international squad.
Well, the excitement was great. that was on the fringes of making Italy 90.
Right,
Missed
okay.
out. Just basically, I think, just a wee bit too inexperienced. There was a wee trial match, and Gary McAllister was actually from the teams, made it into the squad. Excuse me, made it into the squad. But yeah, along came. I'm still on the fringes of things. Round about, I started to play in the qualifiers for Euro '92. Had a massive impact on my debut, where I helped set up the winning goal for Alan McCoist by breaking up the left, intercepted a pass from, of all people, I think it was Hadji, that world-class player that he was. Brought him down the line, come back, we scored the winner, helped set up the winner. So I had an instant impact. Played a couple of times.
Imagine you and Coisty played club football together. That was like a match made in heaven there.
Listen, see, trying to find him, it's very difficult. Not the most mobile of characters, shall we say, at times, you know. But yeah, we know what Ali was. He was a
great finisher.
He could finish. We've seen his goal in Euro '96. If we talk about that, but yeah, on Euro '92. I was in the fringes of things. It was Maurice Marpas who was a left back at that time, a great servant to Scotland. And again, he was one who was just coming to the end of his career. And so I didn't play in the first couple of games. We lost narrowly to Holland and Germany. And then the last game, we were out the tournament, and Andy decided to give myself a little bit of a run, and managed to beat the CIS, as they were at that time. That was Russia. 3-0 in the final game, and I think I had a no bad game. So I'm delighted with that. I was involved and got a game, and not just went there. I know you probably just went there for the experience, but it was great. Get better experience by being involved in the games than you would probably just sitting about the stands and just soaking up. So I got a game in that one, and so that moved on. So it was fantastic. Andy left. Well, I think it was a following campaign that I think Andy left. The campaign for USA, we didn't qualify for that. So I think he left, and then Craig Brown came in. And so they were my only two Scotland managers at that time. Because obviously Craig was successful, and he got a good spell at it, a good run at it.
It's interesting. I said the same story when I was on the Simon Donnelly podcast, but just before you went to Euro '96, you were out at Inverclyde doing just a last minute, I think, training camp.
Yeah.
And I was there with the Scotland under-15 cricket team. And basically somebody must have went and asked if Craig would come and just say a few words to us. So we got to, Craig Brown came over and chatted to us for 15, 20 minutes, and G'd us up a little bit and gave us, and it was I mean, Euro '96 is my first main memory of Scottish international football. Going into the tournament, high hopes. Look at the Scotland team back then. It was, I mean, at the back, Colin Hendry, yourself, into the midfield, McAllister, Burley, Lambert, these kind of guys. Then you had it was all the way through. Am I wrong there? Have I said is that that's pretty much it? Was that the right format I've got there?
Yeah, you had. I'm glad you said that about Craig, asking for a few words and come on talk to you for 15 minutes. I mean, it does like to have a wee chat. And that was one thing that we had plenty of at the time when Craig was manager, was meetings after meetings after meetings. But it was to fill your head with knowledge of either the opposition or watching videos, and don't want to do it too often or too much, at the one time, and just be short bursts. Because sometimes football players can lose their concentration, and certainly that's what something he didn't want to do. He just wanted to make sure that we're all watching these wee clips of videos. But yeah, that was a great build up. I remember being, I can't remember, a Christmas night or something like that, when the draw was made for that, and I thought people got the wind up when they say, "No, you'll be playing England," and obviously England at Wembley, and that was the only time I ever played against England. In my Scotland career. I missed out in '99, as I was talking about, 2 back injuries. I was going through one of my back operations at that time, when we were all unlucky with the Hutchison goal. We lost 2-0 up here and the Hutchison goal down at Wembley. That was my only time. So it was a great build-up, and when you look at it, we started
well. I mean, we started well against the Dutch. Getting a point against the Dutch was a great start.
Well, it was fantastic. Didn't know John Collins was a goalkeeper as well at times, when he seen the handball that he had on.
That's right.
VAR, I think, would have
caught him out there, I think.
But yeah, that was a game where we just sat in and we just made sure that we tried to get the point. Where we were successful with Scotland, certainly more so under Craig Brown, but than Andy Roxon, was we were very solid defensively as a unit, as a team. Weren't possibly the most flamboyant of teams, or the most expansive, but we could get the job done, and we generally got the job done in qualifying and getting to tournaments as we under Andy 92 and we had 96 and obviously 98. So it was a formula that we used and the formula that we worked with. But you've got to have good players and players that can play in these positions and do that kind of role. So certainly under the game against Holland, I think that was really backs to the wall kind of performance. They had some wonderful class. Yeah, wonderful football players. So it was a backs to the wall type performance, and we were absolutely delighted that we got a point in that one.
Big game at Wembley, beautiful sunny day. Never forget it. Gaza is bleached white hair. That, you know, as much as I loved Gaza and I loved him at Rangers, it was we weren't on his side that day. Good game, you know, good game.
It was a game of two halves.
Right,
Yeah, a game of two halves. I think Rangers. Who was it? I'm saying you see Gaza then. I'm thinking Rangers. It was England were certainly of the started the better team, a wee bit more prominent, and had a wee slight chance before the start of the second half. But then we were getting stronger as the game went on, and we were getting better as the game went on. And had we got that penalty, had Gary scored it, I'm sure there would have been only one winner, or one possible winner, because we would have got a huge lift out of that, and we were on the ascendancy. Gaza was just about to, as you know, unfortunately, was just about to get taken off before he scored the goal, and would have been taken off had we scored. I'm sure had we scored that goal, but obviously it's small margins, small things that
haunts me. That one, I must haunt. I don't even want to know how you must have felt, because that still haunts me. That penalty, it was. Oh.
Listen, it happens. You know, there's been worse. We'll talk about worse. It happens. You know, worse can come.
Well, Gaza's missed a penalty in the, you know, in Italy 90. He was.
Did you know?
Stuart Pearce missed. You know, people have broken
hearts.
I
know. I was actually smiling that time when he missed a penalty, right? So I wasn't very broken at that time. But what I will say though is the worst thing about that tournament was the goal that went under Seaman's leg when we were winning 1-0 against Switzerland.
Scotland would have qualified if it wasn't for that. Because
had the whistle blown just I think that was a good few minutes to play as well. But that was a game where we should have won by more. Ali had a great goal, and we should have won it by more that game on that day with some fantastic chances. And towards the end, where we knew 1-0 was doing us, England were 4-0 up, and Craig, I remember vividly asking, "What's happening? Do we need another goal?" And he's just sat calm down, coming for the touchlines. No, we're okay where we are. And then within a few minutes, it was like the Alamo, get everybody forward. We need another goal. England have lost one, and what are we playing at? You know, and tactics were just out the window at the end. Who was up? Big Colin Hendry went up, whenever went up. Just to say that it was a weird scenario, and that was one that I think Scotland have considered themselves being very unfortunate down the years of not qualifying for the next phases, and certainly that was one of the unluckiest ones.
I mean, because we could have that, but like you say, that penalty goes in. We had the momentum. Probably would have turned England over. Well on your way. You only really need a point from the Switzerland game. Yeah. And I mean, I'll never forget what a strike by Ali. You know.
Yeah, it was a fantastic goal, fantastic game. We deserved to win by more. We didn't, and unfortunately, that's well, possibly summed us up. Scotland. We were a team at that time. I don't think we were flamboyant. We didn't score a lot of goals. We were strong defensively. It secured us some qualifications for major tournaments.
Team gelled well as well. It was guys that I think had been around each other quite a bit of time. You know, you played.
Yeah, and it was good players, good, well structured, well disciplined players that knew their jobs. And you know, as you say, when games come around that you had to win, we won them. Might have not been by the best scorelines. We've never been like that. I don't think we ever will. But we got over the line. We knew how to win scrappily. And I think that came from, as I was talking earlier, about being a structure that we knew how to defend. We knew we didn't give a lot of goals away. We'd Andy Gorham in the goals. We had a great structural defensively, both at the back, the three. Calder, with Colin Calder, there was all Colin Henry, myself. Christian Daly would come in occasionally, but in the midfield as well, we all knew how our roles and how to do that defensive structure. And so we weren't the most entertaining team, but we got there, and that's what it was about. So maybe, we wouldn't have scored any more goals at that time in that tournament, but it was very, very unlucky on us, I would say. And it was a huge disappointment in the end that we didn't qualify.
Yeah, no, gutted. Was gutted, especially like you say, that goal that just sneaked in under Seaman. I still think he let that in on purpose. Which
I've got to say, I agree with you.
Broke Scottish hearts. But we go into another big tournament, massive tournament. You played in 2 European Championships, and you get the chance to go to a World Cup in France. And there's no bigger fixture that you could have played in at world football at that point, to open the tournament up with a game against Brazil. And I'll let you, but from a watching on point of view, we played, first half, good introduction, played some really good football, and it comes to the John Collins penalty, but I'll let you go from there.
No, well, we can start with the start and how the build-up, fantastic build-up, obviously going out there in the kilts, and a wee bit of an anticlimax at that time, where we'd done all this, come in with the kilts, got to see the crowd, see some of the family, and it was great. Get into the dressing room, and that's you until you come out for the whistle. You don't come back out to do your warm-up. You don't come back out to, sample some of the atmosphere that's building up. So for about an hour and a half, we were stuck in the changing rooms. I know it's the same for both teams, but you would have wanted. I think they've changed that now, where you go out and do a warm-up out in the stadium. We were warming up inside in a wee room. Admittedly, it was that felt or whatever rubber that they have on the floors, so you could run about and do whatever you wanted. But it wasn't the same as being actually out on the park. And as the game starts to build up and more fans come in, the noise gets noisier, and so that all generates excitement in you as well. So you get that, and then when you come out onto the stadium, you've got your national anthem, you get the French national anthem, you get the Brazilian national anthem, there's I think UEFA national or whatever anthem, so many other things.
It's a long wait.
Yeah, there is a long wait for it to get. Look, we want the game started. That's what you want. You want to come out and get the game started. Forget all the hospitality things, the hamstrings. Just let's get the game started. So that was a wee bit of an anticlimax. But during the game, we had got off to the worst possible start with a early goal. But we settled down, and as I say, we could defend, and they had some right good players as well. One of the best players ever, the original Ronaldo.
Baldy Ronaldo.
And how quick that he was, and how quick with his feet, and that's something that hadn't come up before. Even any players that I played against, the sharpness of his scissor kick and going away was absolutely frightening. But managed to contain him, and then obviously John getting that goal just before half time, which was it gave us a huge boost and huge lift, and we were seeing it out comfortably. Very comfortably in the second half, until I thought that I was wanting a wee holiday home in Brazil and see if I could maybe get a wee space by the Copacabana beach or somewhere, whatever it is down in Brazil, and decided to have an impact in the game. But let's say it was a negative.
I don't think that's what you were intended in the slightest, but you must. It must haunt you. I'm sure life goes on. It's only football.
It doesn't haunt. I can talk about it. I can have a fun about it. I can laugh about it. The reason being, there's something that I couldn't have done about it, because of the proximity that Jim Leighton was to me and trying to just bounce off me. If I had went with a diving, I've scored some of these, don't worry about that at my time. Went with a diving header, you fire it into your own net, or a bad pass back that's went into the goals, that would haunt you worse. That didn't really hurt, because there's not a lot I could have done. I couldn't get out of the water.
You couldn't
I was
really do much.
hoping, even when it came off my chest, and I was hoping that Colin Hendry would have found some pace for somewhere that he never had. You know, I mean, just to get back and want to be lightning quick to get to the ball, but he wasn't. He wasn't obviously able to get there. And then it went in, and just we never. Well, we had a wee chance, which we should have had apparently again, and if it was VAR. I think it was Dunga was on the wall. John Collins took the free kick and his arms out to the side, and it should have been a penalty, but they never got it. So that was a wee bit of a hard luck story in that one, where we should have got a point for there. The following game, as we talked about earlier, about Craig Burley and the goal that he scored, that was one we should have won. That was one we certainly should have won. We played ever so well that day, and I think we were dominant. Norway weren't really in the game. But the last one was huge disappointment.
Morocco was
possibly a case of a Scotland team maybe underestimating it, because we didn't realise that, we didn't think that Norway would beat Brazil. I think it was then irrelevant had we, maybe know if Norway had been, if we'd beaten Morocco. But maybe underestimate Morocco. Oh, who we got to beat here? Morocco. Anybody heard of Morocco? No. What they ranked? They were ranked higher than us in the world rankings.
Yeah.
Morocco, but you think Morocco, we've not seen them, we don't know anything about them, and we're thinking, well, we've played Brazil, we should have got something with that game, we should have beat Norway, we'll do something because of the other results as well. We think, well, we'll just do something against England, and we were very poor that game, very poor.
Had a guy as well in that tournament, another Haji, who made a name for himself. For Morocco, and that's the only guy I remember.
That's right. He went to Coventry, or he played for Coventry.
Played for Coventry. He had a spell with Coventry, but that was a
sore one.
That was a sore one.
In terms of how we to get out the competition as feebly as we did, was poor. We didn't jail. We didn't get anything. There was very few opportunities we had of scoring. We weren't as strong as we were defensively. We seemed to be a wee bit disjointed. Why, I don't know. Was it we did underestimate Morocco? Possibly, I think probably, but it was huge disappointment, because I think both teams thought that whoever won that game was going to qualify, but turns out that Norway beat Brazil, and then Morocco didn't qualify.
How random is that? You wouldn't have, nobody would ever have penciled that result in.
No, totally. But it was a great experience, and we're now sitting here 20 odd years on after it, and thinking that we're here on the day that we're starting another qualifying for a World Cup, and hopeful that we'll get there again soon. But it was huge disappointment away back then, and huge disappointment in between times that we've not qualified for a World Cup before.
I feel sorry for this generation, because I got to witness all of those tournaments. Don't get me wrong, broken hearted quite a lot of the time towards the end of the group stages. It was 96 in particular was gutted, because really believed we deserved to go through in that group. Scotland, played out of our skin, and just one Gaza moment and the miss of penalty. I think just that was the tournament basically right there. But then for not to play in a big tournament for all these years, and then out of nowhere just to kind of slip in the back door and qualify for the Euros, which I don't really think many people thought was likely to happen, is just lifted. You just see the way the whole nation is just, the spirits have lifted again. We've got this song that's making the waves boogie, and it's it's great. It's just really sad that we don't know yet if it's going to be. Scotland.
It probably sums up Scotland, doesn't it? We've waited 20 odd years to qualify for a tournament, and then we get COVID, and we might not get there. And that would sum us up. Just
do you know what? It might work in our favour. Might mean that you might end up slipping.
There's always a positive. There's always a positive.
I think that a lot of people are tipping us to win it. The writing's on the wall.
Can you tell me what they're on?
Aye. There's some good fixtures. Obviously, one big fixture in particular, that they'll take on the English. I don't think it's a fixture that terrifies me as much as what it maybe did when you played against England, where I think they were real start. I think they're good, but I don't think they're untouchable.
Listen, it all depends on what your attitude is on the game. What you'd want is for English teams, as they've done down the past, is to underestimate Scotland, and that's when we are at our best, as we like to be. And I think most teams do like to be underdogs, because then there's less pressure on you, more pressure on the favourites, as England generally are. And so that's what you want, you know, when you get into the game. Well, what have you got to lose? Nothing. Well, let's go and have a wee go. And we've done that down the years for countless times. Scotland against England coming away with the victories. So yeah, that can happen again. Yes, England will still be favourites without any question. You look at their rankings, and generally in qualifiers, they do very well. When they get to tournaments, obviously not so good. So we want this to be a tournament that they don't do as well. But the only thing is that you're playing them again at their own patch. But we did okay. I think the last time we played them there, did we know?
Yeah, we did. Aye,
and
you mentioned it earlier.
the odds would have been even greater then for us to produce a victory, when you consider they'd beaten us 2-0 at Hampden. But we went down there and showed us how they could play, and we were oh so close to getting to extra time. And it was at Christian Dale, and it missed one. I was unlucky with an effort just late on in the game. So it can be done, and we can get a victory.
Well, we've terrified them
again. We got those little breaks that we've not had at Wembley in the last couple of times we've been there.
We genuinely do. We generally do pretty well in the fixture. We terrified the life out of them up in Hampden with Lee Griffiths putting in 2 phenomenal free kicks, only again to get heartbroken in the bloody last couple of minutes with a soft goal that Harry Kane got. So it's. I hope this is a tournament. The expectations are not too high. I don't think we're going in, and I think that might be the key to the success, that they might just slip in the back door and get through the qualification.
There's also an advantage if we can get the crowd and all that, to be able to play a couple of games at Hampden, which, you know, you think of that, you know, to be able to have your home team, home fans supporting you and your home ground. That's massive, absolutely massive. So you would hope that would be the case, that we get this sorted out for the football, that we can find a solution to get to the football safely.
It'd be brilliant, because the UK
it may come too soon. I think it may come too soon for that, but we'll wait and see.
It would be a great come-out party if the UK if we could get in that situation, and the football could go on in the summer, and it'd be brilliant. But I think, like you're saying, it'll be very much 50-50. I think safety will be coming first.
Yeah, totally agree with that. But as you say, there's always a hope, and we hope, with finger crossed, that I've got my vaccine, so maybe I might be able to get again. Maybe I'll get to the again.
Anyone that's vaccinated should be allowed to go and watch the Euros, I say, especially if they've had their second dose as well. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to chat through your fantastic career, club and country. I'm sure there'll be plenty of Celtic fans that will tune in, and hopefully plenty of Scotland fans as well will tune in to have a watch as well. I'm sure a few Rangers punters will tune in also to have a listen to you. But I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. If you stay on for a minute at the end, I'll catch you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the very best, and hope you have some wonderful more podcasts to come in the future.
Thank you very much, sir.
Cheers.